Hello and welcome to a new video on IGCSE Mathematics. In this video, we shall be discussing enlargements. We shall begin with graphing or drawing enlargements. So the rule for enlargement or dilation, another word for enlargement is dilation, is that P dash, P is any point, equals K times P plus 1 minus K times I. We need to understand what these letters represent. So of course, P is the original point, P dash is the image or the new point, I is the center, and finally K is the scale. So in order to find the image of triangle A, what we're going to do is we're going to create a table. So we have P, and then let's just calculate KP alone. And let's calculate 1 minus Ki alone. And then we're going to add them together to get P dash at the end. So for triangle A, we have 3 points. Let's just label them. We have point A, point B, and point C. So we have A, B, C here. And for A, the coordinates are 4, 1. So we're just going to write 4, 1 here. For B, 6, 1. And for C, we have 4, 5. The value of K in this question is 2 because we have scale factor 2. So we can just write here instead of K, 2. And 1 minus K becomes 1 minus 2, which is -1. And then the center is 7, 3. So here it is 7, 3, like this. So KP is simply 2 times P. So we're just going to multiply here by 2. So we have 8, 2. And we have 12, 2. And we have 8, 10. For 1 minus K and I, of course, this is not 7 over 3. This is a vector, 7, 3. So it's just going to be -7, -3. And this is the same everywhere. I'm just writing it 3 times so that I can add the vectors easily. Finally, we're just going to add these together. And we're going to get 1, -1, 5, -1, and 1, 7. I'm just adding the upper row and the lower row, the elements of the upper row and the elements of the lower row, and you can transform them at the end into points like this, and you're done. All you have to do now is just graph these points. So we have 1, -1, and we have 5, -1, and we have 1, 7. We need to join the points, of course. So we have this triangle at the end looking like this. So there we are. This is your new triangle, A dash. Let's check the marking scheme. So we have 1, -1, 5, -1, and 1, 7. These are the correct answers. Draw the image of triangle A after an enlargement by scale factor -½ center 3, 1. So we remember the equation for enlargement. P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times I. For simplicity, we're going to create our table. So we have P, and then we have KP, and then we have 1 minus K times I. And finally, we have P dash, which is the summation of the second and third columns. So we're just going to add these together in order to get the final image P dash. So we have triangle A, which we need to identify and get points for. So we have here -3 and -5. And let's call this A, let's call this B, let's call this C. Let's just write them down in the table without writing them on the graph as well. So we have A, B, and C. Like we said, A is -3, -5. B would be -3, -3. And C would be 1, -3. Now, KP is simply half times P, because K is, excuse me, so K here is -half, not +half. We're multiplying -half by P. And then 1 minus K would be 1 minus -half. And this would be 3/2, which is 1 plus half, essentially. And I here is 3, 1. So we can fill in the table now. So -half times P, this gives us -1.5. Excuse me, so this would be +1.5 and +2.5. And then here, +1.5, +1.5. We're just multiplying everything by -half. This here would be -half and +1.5. And then for 3/2 times vector I, this would be 4.5 and 1.5. So basically, just in case you're confused, 3/2 here is just 1.5. So we're multiplying 1.5 by this vector, and we don't need to think about the other two entries because they're going to be exactly the same. So this is 4.5 and 1.5 as well. And here we have 4.5 and 1.5. Now we add the vectors together. So we get 6 and 4. Here we get 6 and 3. And finally, we get 4 and 3. So we have 6, 4, 6, 3, 4, 3. I'm just going to write them as points. And we need to now graph them or plot them onto the graph. So we have 6, 4, which is right here, and 6, 3, which would be here. And finally, 4, 3, which would be here. And we would just graph this triangle. This would be our A dash or our new triangle. So 6, 3, 6, 4, 4, 3 are the correct points for the new triangle here. Draw the image of triangle A after an enlargement, scale factor 2, center 0, 4. So again, we have our equation, P dash equals AP plus 1 minus K times I. And we're going to draw the table. So we have P, AP, 1 minus K times I. And finally, P dash. So let's first get the points of triangle A. We have this point here, this point here, and this point here. So we have 0, 1. And we have 0, 2, and 3, 1. Now we're going to multiply by K. K is the scale factor. So the scale factor here is 2. And here, this bracket is equal to 1 minus 2, which is -1, multiplied by the center of rotation. I mean, the center of enlargement, which is 0, 4. So -1 times 0 would be 0. -1 times 4 would be -4. And this would be the same vector in all three entries. Now, 2p means we multiply p by 2. So we have here 0, 2, 0, 4, and finally 6, 2. Now we add these up together. We get 0, -2, 0, 0, and finally 6 and -2. We can convert them back to points. We have 0, -2, 0, 0, and 6, -2. Finally, we plot them onto the graph. So we have this point here, and this point here, and finally this point right there. And we join the 3 points to form the new triangle. We call this A dash, the image of triangle A. So we have 0, 0, 0, -2, and 6, -2 as our final drawing. Enlarge triangle T by scale factor -½ with center 0, 0. So let's remind ourselves of the equation. We have P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times I. K here is -½ and 1 minus K would be 1 minus -½ which would be 1.5. I is 0, 0. So this will kind of simplify things for us in the table. So let's draw the table. We have P, KP, 1 minus Ki, and finally P dash. Let's just extend the table a little bit. So let's get the coordinates of triangle T. Make sure to use the correct triangle, not triangle P, but triangle T. So we have these 3 points here. We have 2, 2 for the first one. And then we have 6, 2. And finally, we have 6, 4. Now, we're going to get Kp by multiplying these points by -½ like we said. Because this here would be -½ So we would get -1, -1, and then -3, -1, and finally -3, -2. Now, in this case, 1 minus K is 1.5 and I is 0, 0. So it just ends up being 0, 0. And when we add them up together, there is no change in the initial vectors. So we just get the same vectors here as we have in the second column. So -1, -1, -3, -1, and finally -3, -2. You can convert them back to points. -1, -1, -3, -1, and -3, -2. These are the final points for this question. We're going to plot these points. So we have -1, -1, -3, -1, and -3, -2 as our final points. And this is our triangle here. We can call it T dash. So the points, according to the marking scheme, are -1, -1, -3, -1, and -3, -2. Again, we have shape A and we want to enlarge it. So our equation is P dash equals Kp plus 1 minus K times I. Let's create our table. So we have P, we have Kp, we have 1 minus K times I. And finally, we have P dash. We can extend the table a little bit just to get more space to write. Seeing that here we have 4 points, not 3. We have 4 corners here, so we can just use all 4 points. So our first, let's just first label the points A, B, C, D, so we know what we're talking about. So for point A, the coordinates are -3 and +1. For point B, -3 and +3. For point C, we have -2 and +3. Finally, for point D, we have -1 and +1. So to get Kp, first we understand, of course, that K here is 2, and that this bracket is equal to 1 minus 2, which is negative 1, and that the I here would be negative 7 and 0. I like to fill in the third column first because it's just a constant. So negative 1 times this vector gives us 7 and 0. And like we said before, this is going to be the same entry everywhere. So I'm just going to write it here 4 times. Now let's multiply p by 2. So here we get negative 6 and 2, negative 6 and 6, negative 4 and 6, finally negative 2 and 2. And then we add the vector, which is basically adding the upper element by 7. So this is 1 and 2. This is 1 and negative 6. This here would be 3 and 6. And finally, so excuse me, so this was positive 6, not negative 6. I made a mistake here. And finally, here we have 5 and 2. So let's just plot these points. We have 1, 2, which is here. And then we have 5, 2 here. And we have 1, 6. And we have 3, 6. Now we can join them together. And we get A dash. Let's check the marking scheme. So 1, 2, 1, 6, 3, 6, and 5, 2 are the correct answers here. So in the next part of this video, we shall be describing enlargements. Describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle T onto triangle U. So the easiest transformation to spot is enlargement because very simply, the shape gets bigger or smaller. So if there is a difference in the size of the shape, which is something you can notice by eye, then this is definitely an enlargement. So what do we need to figure out for the enlargement? We need to figure out K, and we need to figure out I. I is the center. Let's just call this for now X, Y. And we need to figure out the value of K. So let's take a point. We have 3 unknowns here, and we're going to try to figure out each of them. So let's take this point here, let's call it P. And then let's take the corresponding point, which is the right angle, and we're going to call that P dash. So excuse me, I made a mistake here. So we're going from T to U, not U to T. So T would be P and U would be P dash because we're going from T onto U. So the initial is P and the final is P dash. So anyway, our equation here is P dash equals K P plus 1 minus K times I. Let's just write down the coordinates here. So P dash has coordinates 1 and 2. This is equal to K multiplied by P. P has coordinates 7 and 8. So this is 7 and this is 8. And then here we have 1 minus K times X and Y. So you have two approaches here. You can either get this with complete algebra, or you can get the K or the scale factor very easily by just measuring the side of the initial and the final. So I'm just going to use that because it simplifies life for me here. So for example, this side here, the horizontal side, has a side length of 2 boxes. And the vertical side here, I mean the horizontal side in the other triangle is just 1. So we know that the K is half, but it's not only half, it's actually negative half. And the reason it's negative is because the orientation of the shape itself changed because it was looking down and now it's looking up. So T is kind of pointing downwards and U is kind of pointing upwards. So you know that K here is negative. So this is the quick way of finding K instead of trying to use a lot of algebra. So now that we have K, we can just put it here as negative half. And then 1 minus k would be 1 minus negative half, which is 1.5. And we can create our equation. So 1, 2 equals negative 3.5 and negative 4 plus 1.5x, 1.5y. To get x and y, you can just combine the two vectors on the right into a single vector. We just have negative 3.5 plus 1.5x and negative 4 plus 1.5y. And this is equal to 1 and 2. So we compare the upper and the lower rows separately. So we have 1 equals negative 3.5 plus 1.5x. And we have 2 equals negative 4 plus 1.5y. And we can solve each equation separately for x and y. So this goes to the left. We get 4.5 equals 1.5x. So x is equal to 3 because x is equal to 4.5 divided by 1.5. And this is equal to 3. For the y, we can again take the negative 4 to the other side as well. So we have 6 equals 1.5y. So y equals 6 over 1.5, and this is equal to 4. So now we have x and y, we have the center of enlargement. We can describe the process here as an enlargement or a dilation. You can use either word, of course. And the scale, or the scale factor, is negative half. And the center is xy, which is basically 3, 4. Or it would actually be better to write this as 3, 4, because the center is kind of a point. I just use vector notation to simplify the algebra. So now we're done. Enlargement, scale factor negative half, center 3, 4. So let's try this again. We have a transformation that goes from S onto T. So let's choose a point. We're going from S, so S has point P, and T here has point P dash. They have to be corresponding points, of course. Now, the scale factor here is obtained by comparing the side lengths. So this here is 4, and this here is 2. So it's the final divided by the original, of course. So k would be 2 over 4, which is basically half. And it's positive because the orientation did not change. So they're both looking in the same direction in a sense. So k equals half. And then we write down our equation. P dash equals kp plus 1 minus k times I. And we fill in all the coordinates. So P dash would be 4, 1. And this is equal to K times P, so half times P, which is 8, 2, plus 1 minus K, so 1 minus half. 1 minus half is 0.5, basically. So 0.5, and we want to get the center, which is xy. We don't know that. Now, 4, 1 equals half times 8, 2 is basically 4, 1 again. Half times 8 is 4, half times 2 is 1. And we have here 0.5x, 0.5y. Another easier way of calculating x and y is to first subtract. So you do 4, 1 minus 4, 1 equals half x, half y. Of course, here it's very apparent that this is going to be 0. So you have 0, 0 equals half x and half y. So you can just multiply by 2 on both sides or anything. So let's just multiply here by 2 and 2, just to be very thorough. 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 0 is 0, and then here 2 times half x would be x, 2 times half y would be y. So xy is basically 0, 0. So we're going to write enlargement. And the scale, as we said, is half. And the center is 0, 0. So enlargement and half and origin or 0, 0, of course, they mean the same thing. Describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle P onto triangle Q. So for this diagram, we know for a fact that they have the same orientation, so the scale is positive, and P here has a side length of 2, and Q has a side length of 1, so 1 over 2, positive half. We take one point, any point, and we take the corresponding point. So this is going to be P, and this is going to be P dash. And we write down the equation, P dash equals Kp plus 1 minus K times I. And we plug in the values. So P dash has coordinates 2, 1. This is equal to K times P, so this is half times P, which has coordinates 4, 2, plus 1 minus K. So 1 minus half is basically half again. So 1 minus 0.5 is 0.5. So we're just going to write 0.5 here, and X and Y. So we get 2, 1 equals, and now half times 4 and half times 2. So this is again 2, 1 plus half times XY. So in the last problem, I showed you this with very thorough algebra, but here we can just save time and say that since this is equal to that, this term is entirely equal to 0. So the center is 0, basically. The I is equal to 0, the center of rotation, the center of enlargement. So we have here enlargement, and the scale is positive half. And the center is basically 0 and 0, or center origin. So enlargement, scale factor half, and center 0, 0 are the correct solutions. You should write it as a point, not as a vector, excuse me. Or you can just write center origin, that will be correct as well. Here we have AB and we have PQ, and we want the single transformation that maps the line AB onto the line PQ. Of course, here it's not immediately evident that this is an enlargement. However, if you notice here, to go from here to here, you add 4. To go from here to here, you add 5. And for the new points, go from -2 to -10, you're subtracting 8. And from -6 to -16, you're subtracting 10. So it is evident that K here is basically equal to the final over the initial, like we said. So either you use -8 over 4, or you can use also -10 over 5. Either way, you're going to get K equals -2. Now we want to get the center of enlargement. So we're going to take one of the points only. So let's say P will equal 1, 3. And P dash is going to equal the corresponding point, which is -2, -6. And we're going to plug them into the equation. So we have P dash equals Kp plus 1 minus K times I. So K here is basically -2. And 1 minus K will be +3. 1 minus -2, so this is +3. And we can immediately proceed. Of course, I is just XY because that's what we don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out. So P dash is, like we said, -2, -6. And this is equal to -2 times P. P here is 1, 3 plus 3 times XY. So if we expand this, if we just distribute the -2, we get -2, -6 here as well. So we immediately know that the center of enlargement here is 0, it's the origin, and we can proceed to write the final answer. So the enlargement, the answer is enlargement, and the scale factor is equal to -2, like we said, and the center is the origin, or 0.00. Let's check the marking scheme. So enlargement and -2 and origin are the correct answers here. Describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle A onto triangle C. So let's begin again with the original method. We have P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times I. First of all, we want to figure out the K. We're going from A to C and they have the same orientation. So K is positive, and this length here is 1, and this length here is 2. We're going from A to C, so it's C over A in a sense. So K will basically be 1 over 2. The shape is getting smaller, so expect K to be less than 1. So this here is 0.5, and 1 minus K as well will be 0.5. Now let's take a point. Let's take, for example, this point here and this corresponding point here. So we have here 4, 1, and this here looks like it's 0 and 0.5. So this is our P dash. So 0, 0.5 equals 0.5 times 4, 1 plus 0.5 multiplied by I, which we don't know, so this is xy. So we have 0, 0.5 equals 2, 0.5 plus 0.5 xy. Or we can just write here 0.5x, 0.5y. I'm just going to take this vector to the other hand side and subtract. So this will be 0, 0.5 minus 2, 0.5 equals 0.5x, 0.5y. So we have -2 and 0 equals half x, half y. You can multiply both sides by 2, or you can just equate and form two equations. It's up to you. So -2 equals half x. So x equals -1, and 0 equals half y. So y equals 0. Now we are ready to write the final answer. So this is again an enlargement. And the scale factor here is equal to half. And the center is -1, 0. So I seem to have made a mistake here. So this is quite a simple mistake. Let me just correct it on the spot. I said that the x is equal to -1. This was just a calculation mistake. So when you take the half to the other side, you're supposed to divide by half. I multiplied by mistake. So -2 divided by half is actually -4. So this value should be -4, and that was my mistake here. So you should write -4, not -1. This is a small calculation mistake, but I hope it did not confuse you with regards to the concept of enlargement. Describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle A onto triangle C. So in this case, we can see that A and C have different orientations, so that we know that K here is going to be negative. Now, A has this side, which is 2, and the corresponding side in C has 4 boxes. So when we do 4 over 2, it gives us -2. So this is our scale factor here. Now we are going to follow the same procedure again. P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times I. This is, of course, xy. This is not known. K is -2. This bracket is 1 minus -2, which gives us 3. So we have 3 here. And we have we need to figure out P and P dash, of course. So the right angle is always the easiest to use. So this is P, and the corresponding one is here. This is P dash. So let's just put P dash underneath the symbol for it. So P dash is -10 and -6. I'm just going to write here -10, -6 equals -2. And then we're going to write the value of P. P is 5 and 6. So we have here 5 and 6 plus the remainder of the equation, which we already wrote. So we can start to simplify. -10, -6 equals -10, -12 plus 3x, 3y. We're going to take the vector here to the other side. So we get -10 plus 10, so 0, -6 plus 12, which is +6. This is equal to 3x, 3y. It's actually even better to not take the 3 into the vector. I'm just going to show you a different algebra technique here. It's just better to leave the 3 outside, and then you can take this 3 to the other side, but it will be 1/3. This is an easier way of doing it. If you understand it, that's fine. If not, you can just use 3x and 3y. Now you can multiply these out. So you get 0 and 2 equals x and y without having to solve each variable separately. Now that we have our answer, we can write it down. So enlargement, and you have a scale factor of -2, and you have a center of 0, 2. Let's check the marking scheme for that. So enlargement, -2 and 0, 2 are correct. Describe the transformation that maps A onto B. So here we know that the K is positive because they have the same orientation, and A here has this side equal to 4. The corresponding side in B is equal to 2. So K is equal to +2/4. This is, of course, the same as +½ We have P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times I. So K is half, so this is 0.5. 1 minus 0.5 is also 0.5. This is, of course, xy. Let's get P and P dash from the drawing. The right angle here is P, so let's just use that. And the right angle here will be P dash. So P dash has coordinates -4 and 5. Excuse me, mistake here. So we have -4 and 5. Excuse me, so this is -3 and 5, not -4 and 5. -3 and 5 for P dash. And then we have 0.5 multiplied by P. P is 1 and 2. And then plus 0.5 times xy. I'm just going to leave the 0.5 outside because it's easier algebra. So now we have -3 and 5 equals 0.5 and 1 plus 0.5 xy. We're going to take the vector to the other side. I'm going to get -3, 5 minus 0.51 equals 0.5 xy. Now just simplify, you get -3.5 and 4, and these are equal to 0.5 xy. So you want to take the half to the other side, so this is like half. And when you take it to the other side, it becomes 2. So you just multiply this vector by 2, and you get a final answer of -7 and 8. This is your center of rotation. I mean enlargement. I keep making the same mistake. So this is enlargement with a scale factor of +½ and a center of -7, 8. Let's check the marking scheme. So center is -7 and 8. This is correct. And the scale factor is half. This is also correct. Now, moving on to our final problem. We want a transformation that maps flag A onto flag C. So you can see that A and C both have the same orientation. So A here has this side equal to 4, C has this side equal to 2. So K would equal 2 over 4, which is 1 over 2, and K is positive, of course. So we write P dash equals KP plus 1 minus K times P dash. Excuse me, this was a mistake. So it's 1 minus K times I, not times P dash. Now the I has unknowns, X, Y. And the K we said is 0.5. So the 1 minus K will be 0.5 as well. Now P dash and P need to be obtained. So P is the original flag, of course. So P will lie here, for example, and then P dash would be here. Now P dash has coordinates -4 and -5. Let's just write that down. -4, -5 equals half times the coordinates of P, which are -8 and -3, plus 0.5 multiplied by xy. So let's simplify. So this becomes -4 and -1.5. Let's keep this as it is. And on the left, we have -4 and -5. We're going to take this vector here. We're going to subtract. So we have -4, -5, minus -4, -1.5 equals 0.5 multiplied by xy. So -4 minus -4 will be 0. -5 minus -1.5. This is the same as -5 plus 1.5. So this is -3.5 equals half times xy. We can take the half to the other side. It becomes 2. We multiply the 2 by the vector. So we get a final answer of 0 and -7. This is our center. So we are now ready to write the final answer. The final answer will be enlargement. And the scale factor is half, positive half. And the center is 0, -7. And we can now check the marking scheme. So enlargement is correct, scale factor is half, and center is 0 and -7. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope this has been beneficial. Thank you for watching.